All right. Happy Tuesday. How's everyone doing? Look who dropped by the office this week. Maxine wanted me to let you know that you should come to office hours. You can see the office hours on my door here. So drop by Wednesdays, 10:30 to 12:30. It was nice seeing everyone who showed up last week. Yeah, feel free to stop by. You all get some nice sunlight this weekend, hopefully. I know a few of you did homework for me. I hope that wasn't many of you. Hopefully you can get all of your homework turned in before the weekend so you can live free. Let's see, housekeeping. So I just posted homework, 1.5. That's due on Friday. As always, if you need an extension, you just email me and you can turn it in on Monday. Let's see, and then we have our first mini exam on Tuesday next week. So first thing on Tuesday, a week from today. I'm going to post more information about that, including a mini exam demo. So just me writing a mini exam on camera. So I'll just talk you through my thought process as I try to answer each one of the questions. And if there's enough petition for it, we can. I'll try to schedule a review session, but you let me know if that's something that might be helpful. I think we won't hold it for this first one, but we might hold it for the next one. So drop in for office hours and let me know if that's something that might be helpful. And then your homework should be back to you in the next 24 hours or so, so you can expect that. Let's see. I think that's all the housekeeping. Anything I missed? Oh, attendance. How many of you have used Top Hat? Okay. If you haven't used Top Hat, we can chat about it after class. This is just a way for me to give you a little bit of extra reward for doing your job and showing up. So 1% at the end of the semester comes from your attendance, on top of the 100% that comes from everything else. So this is just a little extra gift. So this is the attendance code. You all probably know what to do with this. So last week, on Thursday, we left off talking about panel data, which is one of my favorite topics. So we walked through this last time. We talked about long format data. So this was, we had coffee shops and then we had transactions just in sequence. And we called this long format because we were just basically stacking each of the individual observations just one after the other. So we have each of the transactions just getting listed. We have the hour of the day, and then we have the coffee shop. And you'll remember there were 3 coffee shops. We stacked all of their transactions. We didn't break them out by coffee shop. We just labeled which coffee shop the transaction occurred at. And then we also had wide format, which we haven't spent as much time on. And this is where we're picking up today. So wide format data, instead of stacking each observation one after the other vertically, we're just giving each year, so the time component gets its own column. So we have each row representing an entity. In this case, this is the country, and then each one of the subsequent columns is just a year. And so we're going to work with this data set most of the first part of class before we jump into part 1.5. But I have some extra questions I wanted to ask you that we didn't get to last time, which we are going to talk about today. So this is our wide format where instead of stacking vertically, we're sort of orienting it horizontally with the time component represented by separate columns. Okay, and then we walked through this example where we were thinking about where to hire a barista, and we had this data set, and you answered a bunch of questions about this. So we talked about separate coffee shops and transactions by coffee shop. And this gave us one view of our data set. So this was which coffee shop is busiest if we're just looking at like day-to-day aggregate transactions. But it wasn't the kind of view of the data that we wanted for our question, which was essentially which shop shift was the busiest. So another view we took was to look at time. We sort of aggregated by time. So we counted up each hour as its own bin and then created a histogram of that data. So this gave us a picture, sort of as you'd expect, coffee in the morning is most popular. And so what we wondered was the busiest shop in the morning the busiest? And it turns out the answer was no. We walked through and we said, actually, with this terrible figure, we can see that coffee shop C, which was not the busiest shop, but coffee shop C was the busiest shift in the morning. So coffee shop C in the morning was the busiest shift. And then we said, this is not a great figure, how can we improve it? Well, so we have the three lines, the three coffee shops through time, each one having a separate sort of time component. So we just plot this as three line graphs. And this is what we did with Seaborn pretty simply. We did it in Excel and in Python. So this was panel data, right? So we have each coffee shop through time broken out by coffee shop. And this gave us a picture of that panel data. And this is one incredibly powerful tool we have to understand panel. It gives us more than just the cross-sectional variation, and it gives us more than just the time series variation. It gives us both. And this is a classic picture on panel data. Okay, we walk through some of the summary here and the exercise. And we reproduced some of these things, mainly the line graph here. And it's a little more complicated than what we've done with figures before. There's a lot of entries into the hist plot, but this is the general picture and the kind of code that we can do it. We also did it in Excel. There was a similar question on your homework, creating multi-line graphs, which I think was a little simpler than this, but still creating these kinds of graphs. Okay, any questions here? So that was the first part of panel data. We talked about long format, where we just stack each observation one after the other, and then we just keep track of which entity corresponds with which row. But the second data set we started working with was with this coffee consumption per capita data set. So we have many countries around the world drinking coffee, and we're thinking about their coffee consumption through time. And we just have separate columns for each one of the countries, or separate rows for each one of the countries with the columns representing the time, the year. And if you'll remember, let me just bring up that data set so we can remind ourselves of what that looks like. So this was coffee per capita. So this is the picture of the data we had at the beginning. We have each of the country codes in a column. So these are for each one of these rows, we just have multiple observations for their coffee consumption per capita across time. And so you can just see, as we move horizontally, we're moving through time, which I think in my mind anyway, sort of corresponds better with a time series, where we have each one of the rows, each one of the columns representing a different time. But we have two formats of panel data, and each are equally valid. Okay, so this is the data we're working with for the last part of part 1.4. And I walked you through this picture from last time. We said, here's a histogram of coffee consumption per capita, where you have the horizontal axis representing just the coffee consumption, and then we're making a histogram binning each observation, each country into essentially a bin, and then we're just counting coffee consumption per capita using a histogram in the standard ways. And our main question here is the world drinking more coffee? We started answering some sub-questions. None of them we can answer with this histogram, right? This gives us no picture for thinking about changes through time. This is just a snapshot, cross-sectional variation in 1999. So we said, what if we add a second histogram on top of this? So I think two histograms on the same figure can work, but it doesn't really work that well for this question. We have 1999, and then we also have 2019. So we have 20 years between these two observations, these two snapshots. And we tried to answer the main question for us, is the world drinking more coffee, using this figure. And the answer here was, well, it looks like there's probably more coffee being consumed, but these histograms don't give us a great perspective. It's pretty hard to see what's going on here. So the first thing we did was turn to a multi-box plot. And I think this made the answer to our question much clearer. From this picture, we saw a shift out in coffee consumption per capita, at least among the countries that we're observing. Okay, so we have this nice picture. Coffee consumption per capita seems to be increasing between these 2 years. So this sort of answers our main question with a general yes. But the remaining part of part 1.4, thinking about panel data, we've devoted to trying to understand the sub-patterns. So what's going on within this outward shift in coffee consumption per capita. One of the things we did last time was break this this shift in coffee consumption per capita into 5-year increments. So we're looking at 20 years. What if we add sub-years? So this is where we started. This was the first sub-picture. We wondered, was there a big jump in any one year? Or was there just a steady, gradual increase in coffee consumption over this time? And the short answer is, it looks like it's pretty steady. So we broke this into some sub-questions. We looked at the medians, tried to find, coffee consumption per capita under a certain threshold. We looked at the biggest jump in any 2 years, any two periods, with the biggest jump in the medians. And then we looked at the minimums. It seems to be an increase in the minimums over time, and then the maximums over 20 years have definitely gone up, but it's not a consistent pattern. And then we asked some more complicated sub-questions, like all of this. And this brings us to where we are currently. We've walked through these multi-box plots and answered these kinds of questions. For the sake of time, one thing we could do, and if you want more experience working with multi-box plots, I have a nice example here, a nice exercise to work through multi-box plots with this data set. So it's basically reconstructing these figures. But for time, we're not going to do this in class today. Everyone rejoices. Do you all like multi-box plots? Anyone love them? Okay. Anyone hate them? Hate's a strong word. I think I'm sort of ambivalent with them. I think they can give us a nice picture, but they're not always the greatest tool. They're not that, I think, Yeah. When I look at them, I just, for some reason, don't love them. When I look at her, I do love her. Much more than a box plot. Okay. Did I tell you I had a child recently? I don't know if I mentioned that. So I left you with one question. So if you want to, you can go through and try to construct a box plot with this code. We'll save that for non-class time. What if I gave you this question? In which year did most countries increase their coffee consumption per capita? Discuss this with your neighbor. We'll take like 30 seconds to a minute here. I want you to think about how you might answer that question with this figure. And in the process, tell your neighbor something very boring you did this weekend.
Right. I would say that's the best guess, but a guess isn't good enough. Not necessarily. It's fair to just grab it along.
Okay, someone answer this for me. What do we know about the answer to this question? Luke.
Can't answer it definitively with this visual.
Okay.
Our best guess was from 2009 to 2014 because of the median shift. But
Okay.
while that might suggest it, it's not. We can't be certain. We have to do further analysis.
Okay, so one thing Luke is saying here, first off, we can't be definitive about the answer to this question. We're not able to track which observations are which across two different box plots. Luke is also saying maybe the biggest shift happened in like 2009 to 2014 because of the shift in the medians, which is a reasonable thing to guess. What else? Yeah, Matan.
I would guess from 1999 to 2004, because that's the biggest shift in like quartile 1, quartile 3, which is like, no, I'm not even looking at that.
Oh, here.
Yeah, that's like, that range is where most of the people are. Most of the
Okay, yeah, so 50% of countries are below the median, and Matan is saying we have this actually pretty major shift up in the Q1 from here to here. And so maybe it's actually that year. Okay. What else? So we've concluded we can see shifts in the quartiles using these box plots. And we have some picture of the data points behind the quartiles using the strip plots that I've added some color on top of the box plots. But we've also concluded that because we can't track which data point is which across any two box plots, we can't actually answer our question. This picture doesn't allow us the visual to answer our question. I think I might have mentioned what we can use to answer this question. And I mean, the slides are on the website, so maybe some of you have seen this. Anyone know what we're doing next? Or if you can read my mind. So we can't see the answer to this question. instead of asking the question I just asked you, next we're going to ask this question. So instead of breaking it into smaller parts, we're going to look at a very big interval. We're going to go from 1999 to 2019 and ask how many countries increased their coffee consumption per capita during that time. This, again, is a question we can't answer with this figure because we can't track where this individual country landed in 1999. We don't know if they increased or decreased their coffee consumption. It could be that this point ended up out here, became the maximum, but it could also be that they became the minimum, and we just don't know. So let me show you my favorite visualization tool, and that is the scatter plot. So instead of plotting two box plots, all we're going to do is plot each individual country as one data point on a two-dimensional graph. The horizontal axis represents coffee consumption per capita in 1999. And then on the vertical axis, we have the same entity, the same country, but their coffee consumption per capita in 2019. So each one of these data points represents one entity, but at two different times. What we're going to do for the next few minutes is just try to examine how to interpret these kinds of figures. This gives us a very different perspective on the same data set that our box plots did. This is the same data as this. We're just representing it in a different way to give us a different, an answer to a different question. This picture was good at telling us whether the distribution had shifted, but now we're wondering which countries increased their coffee consumption, which is something this box plot cannot do. Okay. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions here. So we've plotted all of these points, and each one represents its own country at two different points in time. The first thing we're going to do is represent no change as the 45-degree line. So if a country has not changed their coffee consumption per capita, they'll be at the same level of coffee consumption in 2019 as they were in 1999. My jokes fall flat. There are errors in my slides. I can't pronounce 1999. I can write great Python code. Self-deprecating humor doesn't even work, so I'm not even. So we've a 45-degree line here, which represents all of the possible combinations of coffee consumption in 2019 and 1999, where we have not changed our coffee consumption per capita. Okay. Any questions here? So if you're consuming 0 coffee per capita in the first year and 0 coffee per capita in the second year, you'll be at 0, 0. And if you're consuming 20 kilograms per capita in the first year and 20 kilograms per capita in the second year, you'll be at 20 kilograms per capita. You run a line up until it hits 20 kilograms per capita in the second year. And that gives us the point representing the change in our coffee consumption per capita. Because there's no change, that point is represented on the 45-degree line. Okay, so a couple of sub-questions that we can answer with this type of picture. We could ask how many countries increased their coffee consumption per capita between these 2 years. And I gave you the answer if you were looking at the slides. But someone tell me intuitively, how would we think about identifying the points that have increased their coffee consumption per capita during this time? Like, how are we using this figure to answer that question, Ruby?
Anything like to the left.
Okay. And why is it to the left?
Because it would show the, I don't know, like the line shows how things are constant.
Yeah.
So if they increase, then you sort of logically a little bit higher.
Okay. Yeah, this is very nice. So Ruby's saying to the left or above this 45-degree line. Anyone else want to try to maybe offer a systematic approach for thinking about why it's above or to the left? Yeah, is it Darren?
Because the line offers like a one-to-one increase.
Yeah.
Any dot that deviates closer towards the y-axis, which represents like a higher increase in consumption in 2019 in comparison to 1999. So
Yeah.
in theory, any line or any dot that's under the one-to-one ratio also means that there's more consumption in 1999 than there is in 2019.
Yeah, so nice. So we will use this 45-degree line to find not just increases, but also decreases. And what Darren's saying essentially is, if we're at 8 kilograms per capita, for example, we can look at the point that corresponds to no change, which is on the 45-degree line, and then just find something that's higher than it. And all of those points are going to be in this upper triangle. So it's going to be either higher or to the left. Okay, so the next question is, so we have this picture, which represents all of the points that have all the coffee consumption, all the countries that have increased their coffee consumption per capita during these 2 years. And this is the answer to our question. We can easily see it with a scatter plot between 2 years, using the same measure in the 2 years, and then we can just scatter the 2 values, one column versus the other, in a scatter plot. The base year, the starting year, is the horizontal axis, and then the new year as the vertical axis. And this answers our original question. We can just go through and count up the number of countries that have increased their coffee consumption per capita during these 2 years. Okay, and then, as you'd expect, we can see all of the countries that have decreased their coffee consumption per capita as the ones below the line. So just like before, all we need to do is draw a line from where we are. So we pick one of these countries, and we draw a line to the horizontal axis. And if we're below the 45-degree line, so if this line hits our point first before it hits the 45-degree line, then that tells us that we've decreased our coffee consumption per capita, because we haven't actually, we're not at a level of coffee consumption per capita in the second year that we were in the first year. Okay, any questions about this? This may seem simple as a tool, right? We're looking at 2 different years, we're plotting the same measure in both of those years, and we're plotting it on a 2-dimensional graph, a scatter plot. But this is a very powerful tool. We can use this for panel data, and as I'm going to show you in a second, we can also use it for variation through time. This is, I think, this is my favorite visualization tool, the scatter plot, because it's so incredibly versatile and powerful. We're going to use it a lot this semester. In fact, I would say this is probably our core tool for visualization. Okay. And then one thing we can do is actually just label using colors which countries are increasing and which countries are decreasing. And I'm going to show you an easy way to do this in Python in a second. Okay. So going back to our original question, does the data confirm that the world is drinking more coffee? I see a lot of people saying yes. Someone tell me why. Yeah.
Usually we can tell that countries have basically increased their consumption over the years.
Yeah.
So we can easily say that a good majority of the world has increased their consumption of coffee.
So during these 2 years, the 20 years that we're looking at, it looks like most countries have increased their coffee consumption per capita. The majority of countries are in red, telling us that coffee consumption per capita has gone up. And then there are only a few countries below the line that seem to have decreased their coffee consumption per capita. This is an incredibly powerful tool. Okay, and it looks simple, which is part of why it's powerful. It's powerful because we can turn seemingly complex relationships into something that you can easily ingest. You can understand this in 10 seconds, but it's a pretty complex set of relationships. Okay, so this is panel data in wide format.